In the summer of 2022, a man who had once operated some of the heaviest logging equipment through the toughest wetlands in North Carolina sat down alone in front of his phone camera. No crew, no script, no warning. What he told his followers that day surprised almost everyone watching. Most people assumed Bobby Goodson had simply eased into a quieter life once Swamp Loggers went off the air. Maybe scaling back, maybe still logging here and there for fun. What they didn't realize was that for nearly 10 years after the camera stopped rolling, Bobby had been quietly wrestling with a struggle nobody was filming. And by the time he finally opened up about it, the truth was far more serious than anyone had guessed. Here's something most Swamp Loggers fans rarely talk about. Throughout the show's run, Bobby Goodson's business was under financial strain that never made it onto the screen. And honestly, Discovery Channel had little reason to include it. Swamp Loggers aired for 3 seasons, from 2010 to 2012, and gave audiences something unusual for reality TV. An honest, unpolished look at one of the most physically punishing jobs in the country. There was no manufactured drama, just mud, heavy machinery, and the constant danger of things going seriously wrong in a flooded swamp. Viewers saw how brutal the labor was. What they didn't see was how brutal running the business actually was. Bobby's company, Goodson's All-Terrain Logging, based in Johnson County, North Carolina, wasn't a large corporation with deep pockets. It was an independent operation built over decades, using specialized machines to work terrain most loggers wouldn't dare touch. That specialty was what set the business apart. But it also came with relentless costs. The equipment tells much of the story. Machines built for wetland logging, track skidders, purpose-made harvesters. The gear needed to pull timber out of the swamp without losing it to the mud are expensive to buy and even more expensive to keep running. Constant moisture, rough ground, and non-stop heavy use wear these machines down fast. So repairs aren't occasional, they're routine. And when something major breaks, the repair bill can wipe out weeks of profit in one shot. Add in fuel, payroll, insurance for a dangerous industry, and the logistics of hauling timber out of remote swampland to a mill, and the real profit margins start to come into focus. Then stack a television production. On top of all that, filming a show like Swamp Loggers wasn't just a camera crew tagging along for the ride. It meant coordinating schedules, capturing specific shots, and dealing with the logistical demands of production, demands that didn't always match what was best for the actual logging operation. Bobby had to keep a real business afloat, while also meeting the needs of a TV crew. The show brought national attention and real pride to his work. It didn't meaningfully improve his bottom line. Still, Bobby made it work for 3 seasons, and the show became something genuinely rare. Authentic television without a writer's room, giving viewers across the country an honest look at an industry most had never thought twice about. But authenticity doesn't pay off equipment loans. When Discovery chose not to bring Swamp Loggers back for a 4th season, there was no send-off episode, no announcement, no fanfare. The show just ended. Bobby went back to Johnston County and kept working, completely in character for him. But that quiet return masked something important. The financial pressures hadn't gone anywhere. Without a national TV platform behind him, every contract now depended entirely on reputation. And the industry itself was shifting in ways that would matter a great deal in the years to come. When a reality show ends, people usually assume the cast either lands another project, fades into background, or cashes in on their newfound fame. Bobby Goodson did none of that. And that says a lot about who he really is. After Swamp Loggers wrapped in 2012, Bobby didn't chase another TV deal, didn't tour on his name recognition, didn't try to rebrand himself as a personality. He went straight back to the swamps of eastern North Carolina, back to his crew and his machines, and kept doing the work he'd been doing for decades before any camera showed up. For Bobby, the job was never performance. It was just a job. Through the mid-2010s, Goodson's all-terrain logging kept running. Bobby and his team were still pulling timber out of wetlands, doing the same demanding, specialized work the show had captured. The terrain hadn't changed. The daily grind of getting expensive machines into places they had no business being, extracting timber, and getting back out without wrecking equipment or hurting someone. That reality never changed either. What did change was the industry around him. Timber mills across the South were consolidating during this period, with larger corporations absorbing smaller operations. That shift had real consequences for independent contractors. When a mill changes hands or grows, its purchasing habits shift too. Volume demands increase. Payment terms tighten, and the value of specialized access to difficult terrain, Bobby's whole niche, can get pushed aside in favor of scale and consistency. For an independent operator carrying the overhead of expensive equipment and a full crew, that kind of market pressure hits the margins almost immediately. Publicly, Bobby's response was low-key, as always. His Facebook updates during those years were genuine. He checked in with fans occasionally, replied to people who remembered the show, and shared glimpses of ongoing work. No complaints, no drama. Just an honest man keeping in touch with an audience that cared, while quietly running a business that no longer had cameras documenting it. What wasn't visible in those updates was how everything was building up behind the scenes. Any single challenge, tighter mill contracts, rise in repair costs, unpredictable fuel prices, was something an experienced operator like Bobby could handle. He'd managed all of it before, in different combinations, for years. The problem was that none of these pressures were letting up, and new ones kept piling on. By the late 2010s, the accumulated strain was leaving less and less room for error. The specialization that had always been Bobby's strength now meant fewer backup options when the broader market tightened. His aging equipment was getting more expensive to maintain. Forces well beyond anyone's control in Johnson County were gathering momentum, and Bobby, who had spent his whole career solving hard problems in hard terrain, was facing something that no amount of swamp experience could fully prepare him for. By the late 2010s, the biggest threat to Bobby Goodson's business wasn't mud, breakdowns, or bad weather. It was the math itself. Logging has always run on thin margins, the kind of business where revenue looks fine until you account for everything it costs to earn it: equipment, fuel, labor, maintenance, insurance, transport. For a swamp logging operation specifically, nearly every one of those costs runs higher, since the terrain is harder on machines, and the specialized gear costs more to buy and keep functioning than standard logging equipment. By the late 2010s, pressures that had each been manageable on their own started compounding in a way that changed everything. Equipment costs kept climbing, not just the expense of keeping old machines running, but the looming question of eventually replacing them. A wetland-capable harvester is a massive capital investment, and once repairs stop being cost-effective, an operator is left choosing between constant repair bills or taking on debt for a new machine. Neither option is comfortable when margins are already razor-thin. Fuel costs were volatile and moving in the wrong direction. Diesel isn't a side expense in logging. It powers everything, from the machines in the field to the trucks hauling timber to the mill. When prices spike and stay high, hauling timber from a swamp to a mill can become barely profitable, or worse, a losing proposition before the load even arrives, especially over long distances or rough terrain, which describes most of Bobby's work. The timber market added its own layer of unpredictability, driven by housing demand, international markets, and broader economic trends completely outside Bobby's control. He could manage efficiency, quality, and cost control as well as anyone in the business, and by every account, he did. But there's only so much individual skill can do against forces pushing the other way.